Hey, welcome back everybody. Welcome to How to Build a Blog Using Laravel. This is a series where we take absolute beginners from absolute nothing to learning how to build a pretty advanced blogging application using the Laravel framework. So if you're just joining for the first time, you may want to go back and watch some of the previous videos if some of the stuff we do here doesn't make sense. But for those of you guys following along, we're going to pick up right where we left off. In the last video, we learned about CRUD, or create, read, update, delete, for our resourceful controllers, okay? So we're starting to work with resources, and the first one we're working with is posts. And this actually creates our blog posts. Now, we created the resource controller in the last video, and now it's time to actually start filling in some of the actions for that controller. So we know that we have to do create, then we have to read, update, and delete all these posts. So it makes sense that this video is all going to be about create. So we're going to learn to create blog posts, which basically means to create a form to submit to our database that will add a new blog post to the database. So we're going to learn two things here. First of all, how to start with the create of CRUD, and then also how to work with forms in Laravel and get forms to kind of automatically fill out in Blade. Okay, stay tuned guys. We're in for a good one. Okay, welcome back everybody. Thanks for sticking here. Again, if you get lost in this video, know that there's a whole playlist that covers all the videos leading up to this point. This is part 11. You can see the playlist in the description. Okay, the last video we talked about CRUD. We're going to learn about create, which is the first part of CRUD in this episode, and we're also going to learn about how to create some forms. So this is the form we're going to be creating today. It's create new post. This is to submit a new blog post into our database, and we'll simply have a title and a body, and then we'll click create, and it's going to submit that to our database. So that's what we're focusing on this video, is getting right here. Okay, so let's take a look at where we are right now. If we come over to our code, we were just working on our post controller in the last video, and we created that resource controller, which created all these actions for us. We have our index, we have our create, store, show. All of these will help us do CRUD functions. The one we're focused on today is obviously the create. And if you really think about what we're going to be doing, we really, for the create command, we just need to be able to show the user a form. That's really all we need to do, right? And then when the user submits that form, that's when we need to really do something with it. We're going to need to validate the information. We're going to need to save it into the database and so forth. But for right now, for the create function, all we really need to do is show that form, and then it's when they submit it that we actually do stuff and submit it to the database. So we're going to show that form here in the create action, and then we're going to have that form submit to the store action. And the store action is where we'll put the logic in order to actually validate it and then save it in the database. So for the create, all we need to do is show a view. If you've been following along, you should know how to do this. We just do return, view, and then the name of the view. Now we haven't created this view yet, but you should already, again, know the kind of convention that we're going to follow. What are we going to call it, and how are we going to organize the files? Think about it. You should know this. We're going to put it in a folder called posts because we're in the post controller. So we want a folder in our views folder called posts where all of the views related to posts are stored. So we have posts dot and then create, because we just want to follow the convention we already have here. If we create a view called create for the create action, it's perfect, right? It makes it really easy. Now we don't need to do anything else, so let's just go ahead and end it with a semicolon, and that's all we need to do in the controller, because all we're doing is showing a single view, and that's it. We don't need any previous information because we know this is a brand new post that they're creating, so we just need to show the form. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's create the view that we need in order to make this happen. First of all, we don't have a posts folder yet, so let's go ahead and make that. We need to go to where our views are stored under resources and then views. You can see there's no folder for posts. We need to make it manually. Let's go ahead and click new folder and then type posts. There it goes. It creates a post. It's an empty folder. We need to create our first view, and this is going to be called create. Okay, so new file, save, and we're going to call this create. And then don't forget blade.php. Okay, so create.blade.php. This allows us to use the Blade templating engine with Laravel, which makes things a lot easier, especially because the next part we're going to learn is how to work with forms, right? Now, before we get to that, let's you guys should know this. How do we get this page up and running? Well, obviously we don't need to redo all the navigation and all that other stuff. It's already created in our template file over here under main. We already have all of our navigation, everything stored in here. So we just need to extend this main.blade.php. So let's come back over to our create file. We can just type extends and then type main because it automatically knows .blade.php at the end. And the main is in our root views folder. So we can just type main and be done. Next, we just need to type the beginning of the section. Now, those of you guys that were there when we created this page, remember that we created a section called title, which allows us to manipulate the title of the page. And all of our pages start with Laravel Blog and then a space. And now all that we need to do is fill in that last part if we want to add anything. Now let's go ahead and just have it say create new post. And so in the title, it'll say Laravel Blog, create new post. So we're going to say that this is the title, this is the section title, the title section, I mean. And then we can just pass in a single item, and we're just going to do the vertical bar, and then we'll do create new post, okay? And then that'll put that into our title. Now the next section we need to work on is just the content. So section, and then content, and then just so we don't forget, I'm going to come down here and do end section, just so we don't forget later and create an error. That's what I always recommend doing that. When you open something, go ahead and close it right away because you'll end up with errors. And if you get too deep, it makes it really hard to kind of work your way out of something as well. So it's good to kind of end it as you start it. All right, and now we can go ahead and actually start creating everything. So in order to, let's just go ahead and actually create the structure first. We want to create a row with, we're going to want to center. If you look over here at what I had created earlier, our actual content actually goes to where this line is. So if you look at this line down here, this is actually the main container of our application, but we don't want the form to be super wide. So I've gone ahead and contained it in an 8 columns of the 12 column grid. And then I centered that. So for those of you guys that haven't worked with Bootstrap in the past, what you do is you just need to create a row and then give that row however many columns you want it to be. So we want this to be 8 columns. And so we're going to create the column with the medium drop breakpoint and then 8 columns total. That's how wide we want this thing to be. Now, if we do it just like this, it's actually going to always push it over to the far left of the application. So we need to tell it to center it, but you can't just tell it to center it. You actually have to tell it explicitly how many columns it should be off of the side. So if we have 8 columns in the middle and it's a 12 column grid, that means there's 4 empty columns. We want 2 on the left side and 2 on the right side. So what we need to do is just tell it to offset by 2 columns. Okay, so it'll have 2 empty columns and then 8 columns and then 2 empty columns. Okay, so what we can do here is we do column MD8 and then column MD and then offset 2. And that'll just tell it to offset by 2 columns. Okay, and then everything we put in here will be kind of in the center of that thing. So let's just go ahead and create our H1 and we'll say create new post. And then just to keep it so it's not bumping up against our form, I'm going to create a horizontal rule, which just creates a nice little line. And then we can start our form in here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just refresh this. For those of you guys that are, remember that we're going to our local host and then posts/create. Okay, that's where we're going. Make sure that you have your, if I'm going to go ahead and shut this off here, make sure you do PHP artisan serve. You need that in order to run the server. And also, one thing that a lot of people were mentioning to me that I guess was kind of confusing in the last few videos was that I don't know if I explained that you can't run some of these PHP artisan commands when you have when the server is currently running in the same window. So like right now, I can't, if I type PHP artisan whatever, it's not going to do anything, right? It just doesn't run. It just does this. And that's because the server is currently running here. So if I refresh, you can see, let me refresh. First of all, this is where we're at right now. So we've just done create new post with the horizontal rule. And you can see that we have a request here and it loaded the favicon, but it's still running the server. We can't do these PHP artisan commands. Now, in order to run that, you can do Command T, and that will create a new tab. And so here we have 2 tabs running in our terminal. And in one tab, you can see that I've got this right here, which indicates that I'm in my blog project and I can run a command right now. I can just start running PHP artisan commands. But in the other tab, I'm running the server, okay? So this is the way to kind of run the server and commands at the same time, all right? That was not clearly made earlier, and so I wanted to make sure that was explained for those of you guys that might have had that problem, and I apologize for not making that clear earlier on. Okay, so this is where we're at right now. Next, we need to start creating our forms. Well, in Laravel 4.2, which is not what we're working with Laravel 5.2, or maybe it's 4.3. Anyway, in Laravel 4, we actually had things called form helpers. And form helpers allowed us to use Blade to generate forms for us really easily. I'm talking super easy. This is an awesome feature that was unfortunately taken out of Laravel 5. Don't ask me why. I don't understand why it was taken out of Laravel 5. It feels like negative progress as far as I'm concerned, but it was. It was removed from Laravel 5. Now, luckily, so many people still use it, so we can actually bring that functionality back into Laravel 5, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do right now, is how to use the form helpers with Laravel 5. We need to load in the form libraries ourselves, okay? So let's go ahead and do that so we can take advantage of form helpers and create our forms really easily. Now, if you come over here, if you create a new tab and go to laravelcollective.com, you will find that this website here basically maintains all the Laravel components that have been removed from the core framework so that you can continue using the amazing Laravel features you love. Again, it makes zero sense that we had to remove features in order to make it to Laravel 5, but we did. So we are here. This is where we find ourselves. Okay, so I'm bitter, if you can tell. I'm bitter that they removed this from Laravel. It makes zero sense, but we're adding it back in. We'll still have functionality. Also, for those of you guys that are going to comment with the explanation, the reason they were removed was because a lot of people don't use form helpers, apparently. If you're just creating a API application or something, you're not actually going to have physical forms. You're just doing this with server requests, and so you don't actually have physical forms. And so for that reason, they decided that they wanted to save the space and not have forms inputted by default and have them kind of be something you do explicitly, kind of an explicit thing that you load in if you need them. In my opinion, I think they should have just had it in there by default like they did before. And if you don't need forms, you could remove them. I don't think that it's that heavy of code that it was really ruining performance issues that much for people. But anyway, that's the real reason that they were removed. But we're adding them back in, so it's okay. Okay, so under Laravel Collective, they maintain several different things here that were taken out of Laravel. And the ones we want to focus on are HTML and forms. Let's go ahead and click that. And here it tells you about how to install these and get them so you can use them. Now I'm going to show you how to do this, but the instructions are all on this website. And the link for this website is in the description as well, for those of you guys wondering. Okay, so what we need to do first of all is open up our composer.json and add this Laravel Collective into that. And then what this does is it's going to basically copy code from their servers into our project. And that code is what's going to enable us to create these forms. Okay, so let's come over here. If we go down to the root of our file, you can see that of our project, we have composer.json. Go ahead and open that up. At the top, this basically tells Laravel or Composer all of the dependencies that we require in order to work with this project. So you can see here that we require PHP. We also require the Laravel framework, and that's itself something. There's also a lot of other stuff we do, like, for example, the PSR4. We've got some of these Symfony and stuff like that as well. So all these are added as requirements for our project. So we're just going to add one other requirement, basically. We're going to make sure you add a comma after Laravel Framework. And then under Laravel Framework, you can just add what we copied from the website. And this tells it to go out to the Laravel Collective repositories, and then download the HTML files. Okay, and then tells it also the version should be 5.2, and then the most recent minor version is basically what this means. That's what the star means. So it's version 5.2 point whatever is the most recent. Okay, go ahead and save that composer.json, and then come back over to your terminal. Make sure you're in your project folder. Okay, you don't want to be at the root. You want to be at your project folder, and then type composer update. And when we click enter on this, what it's going to do is it's going to go out, look at everything in this composer.json, figure out what it doesn't already have, and then go download it from the internet and put it into your, usually your vendors folder, okay? So it's actually copying code, cloning the code from the internet into your local project. That's what's happening right now. Okay, so this can take, I already had kind of done this, and so it's already loaded for me, but this could take like seriously 5 or 10 minutes depending on your internet connection. So if it just seems to sit there, just let it wait and run its thing. It is working. You'll get an error if it doesn't work. Like it'll be red text and you'll get an error. So if you don't see that, just let it continue to run until you get your base command like I do here, where it has the name of your computer and the $ to type in another command. Just go ahead and wait until it takes. It can take 5 or 10 minutes. It can take a while, guys. Okay, so I've got everything installed. What that means is that all the code has been copied for the form helpers into my project now. So now I actually have access to that code. And now we just need to tell Laravel that the code is there. And that's through something called providers. If we come back to Laravel Collective, you can see here it tells you to do composer update. And then it tells you to add a new provider. And this just basically tells Laravel that about the code we just barely installed and where to find it, okay? So it's stored in a folder called collective, and then inside one called HTML, and then it's this class right here. So we want this to load on every page, and that's what the providers do, is it tells Laravel to load that class. So let's go ahead and copy this thing for under providers. You don't need to copy the whole thing, just this one line, and then go ahead and copy that and come back to your folder. And you're going to go into your your config. So there's a config folder up here, and then app. And this is where all the configuration files are stored for your app. And if you scroll down near the bottom, you'll see something called providers, and you can see there's already a whole bunch of providers. Okay, and so what we need to do is just add ours to the list. Okay, so make sure you have a comma again after the most recent one, and then go ahead and click it and save it in here. And then also make sure you have a comma at the end of yours, because it still has to load these ones down here as well. So just always have a comma at the end, because this is an array, so we need to make sure that there's not a syntax error. Okay, this tells Laravel now where to go to find this HTML service provider class. And so that's really convenient. This means we now have access to the file. What we could do is we could actually type something like HTML service provider, and then a function like open or something, right? Technically that's what you can do, but we need to, that's a lot to write. And actually you would have to write the whole namespace. Actually, sorry, you would have to type this whole thing in order to access it. And then you would give it your method. So that's a lot to write. That's very inconvenient. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it an alias to make it really easy to access. And you can see we already have aliases down here. And some of these we're already used to using. For example, we've already used app, we've already used Blade, and we use, let's see, we've used view, and we haven't used session yet, but we're going to be using these, mail and stuff like that. And you can see that these are just shortcuts for these long namespaces. So we don't have to type the entire namespace in. We can just type in this little alias and access this class directly with one little, like a one-word alias. So we're going to create a couple new ones. If you come back over to your Laravel Collective website, you can see that it recommends form and HTML. And so let's copy these, and it tells you where to point those to. And these just go on our aliases. It tells you right here. So under aliases at the bottom, let's go ahead and just submit these. And we're just going to add form and HTML. Okay? And then this just tells it where to go to find these classes. So now we can access these helpers by just using form and HTML. So that makes it really easy. Okay, so we can go ahead and close this. We now have access to all those things, and we have access to our form helpers. So let's go ahead and start working with them. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go ahead and start creating our form. Well, as you saw before, we just need to create a label that says title, and then we need to create a text field for where we type the title. And then under that, we create a label for body, and then a text area for the body of our blog post. And then after that, we just need to create a submit button to submit it. So it's really easy. That's all we need to do. So let me show you how to work with forms. Well, the first thing you need to do is open up a form. Now, if you come over to Laravel Collective again, it tells you right here how to open a form. And let's go ahead and just copy this information. Oops, for some reason I didn't copy it. Let's copy it again. Oh, I'm doing Control V. All right, so let's paste. And okay, so here we've gone ahead and we've opened a form, and then we closed the form. And this basically is similar to, it basically creates the form commands like you were used to with this. But it also does a few other things, like give us CSRF protection, which prevents people from other websites from submitting our forms on our website. And so that's a security feature. And by using these helpers, it automatically enables that and creates a hidden CSRF field, and then also validates it when we submit the form to make sure only people that are on our, people aren't doing it from other websites submitting our forms. So this is really, really useful. And you can see we pass in an array here for URL, and this is the URL that we want to submit to. Okay, so now what we can do is we can actually, we could give it the URL that we wanted to submit to, but I actually want to show you a kind of a cool feature. And that cool feature is the fact that we already, if you remember that we came up here when we listed our routes. And if you want to do this again, if you haven't done this, just remember you can type PHP artisan route and then list, okay, with like that. And that'll show us all of our routes that we have available. Now you can see in here that we have, if we want to take this form and we're going to want to submit it to the store action. This allows us to store it in the database. So the action that we want is post and then store, which is this one right here. And you can see it's called post.store, and the URL is just /posts. With the post method, will actually access the store request, right? So we can do all of that stuff explicitly, but Laravel has another cool feature called named routes. And named routes are what I recommend using because it's the easiest way to manage your routes. You can see here that the routes, it created names for our routes. Posts.store is a name that it created. And if we simply use that named route, it automatically knows to do a post request and also to send that post request to the posts URI. Okay, so it already knows how to do all that by just saying posts.store. Now that's so much easier to manage, and when you are reading through your code, you can just see exactly where it's going because of those named routes. So that's what I want to use instead of the URL, is I want to use this named route. And in order to do that, we just need to pass in a variable, or sorry, a parameter called route instead of URL. Okay, so we're using the URL right now, and let's just pass in route instead. And then we just pass in the name of the route that we want to access, which in this case is posts.store. And again, you can see that by just doing this PHP artisan route list. And you can see post.store, and then that obviously is right here. Okay, so next we need to do is we need to create our labels and then the text field for the title. So in order to create a label, we just need to go and we can do the double parentheses this time. And we can do form, label, and then for our parameters we pass in, we just need to pass in the ID of the label, which in this case, we want it to always match the column name of the database. So in this case, the column name is title. So we can just give it title. And then we can also pass in as a second parameter what we want the what we want it to actually say, the value of the label. In this case, we just wanted to give it a title, capital T, give it a colon, and that way it actually writes the text title there for us. Okay, so that's form label, and then underneath that we need to create the actual form field for it. So we do form and then text, and this tells it to create a text field, and then we give that text field again title. This tells it it should submit it under the title name, and also that these two belong to each other. So we want all these in sync so that when we go to store it, Laravel automatically knows that the title field belongs in the title column of the database, okay? We want to keep all these in sync. Okay, the next parameter we pass in with the text field is the default value. So if we want a default value already kind of filled in there, we can pass that in as a second parameter. Now in this case, we're creating a new post, so we want to keep that blank, but we still need to have a second parameter. So we're just going to pass in null instead of passing in a default value. That way it's blank. Okay, so we pass in null, and then the third value is optional, and it can be an array of any of the other options that you have. Okay, so what we'll do for our second parameter is create an array, and then we'll pass in one of the things we're going to pass in is called class, and that tells it what classes to give this form file. So we do class, and then set that equal to whatever class we want this form, this text field to have. Now in this case, I'm going to give it a class of form control. And if you're used to Bootstrap, you should know what this is. This basically makes it look really pretty. It gives it nice styling for the form, gives it good spacing and stuff like that, okay? So we're going to give it the class of form control and go ahead and save. And I'm just going to really quick go over to our website and show you what it looks like. So we're going to refresh, and here we should get title, as you can see. And then we have our form control. It looks really, really nice. Now let me show you if we get rid of that form control class, or if you're not using Bootstrap, you just get rid of this, and this is what it looks like, right? So that's what the form control is doing. It's just a CSS class that just styles it up and makes it look nice, okay? So let's go ahead and put that back, save. Next, we need to create another label, and this label is gonna have the body of our post. So we'll do label again, you should know this, and then, because we just barely did it. Again, let's make the name of the ID of the label match our form field and also our column name for the database, which in this case is just going to be body. That's why we're calling it body. And then we can name it whatever we want the value of the label to be, we can put here. In this case, we'll say blog, or let's just say post body. Like that. And then let's go ahead and create another form, another item, and we'll do form, this time text area. Now the text area is just like text, but it creates one of those big text area boxes instead of a single line text. Now with text area, the first parameter you pass in is the name that you want it to submit as. You want it again to match the column and the label. So we have body. The second parameter is the default value that you want it to be. So just like with the text field, we can either pass in a default value or we can pass in null because we don't want it to be anything. And then just like the first one, the third item that you pass in is an array, and it can be all the extra options that you want. So we're going to pass in a class, set class equal to form control again, and that's actually it. So let's go ahead and save that and just refresh. And you can see here what we've got. We've got our the beginning of a form. The last thing we need is a submit button. So let's go ahead and add the submit button, and we're done. Now below here, we still need to make sure we're above the closing of the form. And let's create form, submit. This creates a submit button. And we just need to give it the value of the submit, which is actually what it says to the user. So we're going to just say create new post. We'll just say create post. Okay. And if we save that, you can see that it creates a submit button, and the submit button will naturally just go to our, if you remember this from HTML, you just create a submit button. You don't need to give it a URL because it uses the URL that the form has. And the form has the URL that is post.store, okay? So that's where it's going to go. Now I just want to make it look a little prettier. It was kind of ugly before, so we'll use Bootstrap again. Let's pass in another array. And we're going to give it a class and set that class equal to button, so BTN, and then BTN success, which makes it green, so it looks nice and pretty. BTN LG, which makes it large, so it's nice and very visible. And then we'll do BTN block, which makes it full width, okay? So save that. Let's go ahead and refresh, and you can see we get a full width button. Now I just want a little bit of spacing here. We could create a style sheet, and that's normally what I would do. But just for the sake of simplicity in this tutorial, I'm actually just going to do an inline style to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to pass in a second item in our array, say style, and then set style equal to the inline style we want. So in this case, we're going to do margin top, set margin top to 20 pixels, and then save. And then if we refresh, sure enough, it is nice and spaced out. Okay, so we've gone ahead and we've created the form that we wanted. So now it's time to actually work on the store method. And that's what we'll do in the next video, where we'll actually process and validate the form. And this will kind of teach you how to work with form data. And now all the next ones are going to be so much faster because we've already inputted the form helpers, so we can create forms really fast now. And we're going to know how to validate and work with the data and how to store it in the database. Okay, so that's the next video. I'll see you there.